I'm going to remarry my 18-year-old girlfriend. You're in the way, so disappear. What? So, you want a divorce, is that it? Exactly. What is that? Don't joke about things like that. You guys have always treated me carelessly, haven't you? It's too late to get flustered after I've brought up divorce. What? I'm not flustered at all. I'm actually mad that you brought up divorce to Mom first. Don't raise your voice so much. How can you stay so calm? I'm angry too. Got it. Shall we get divorced then? Oh, you'll grant me a divorce? That makes things easier. What? Mom? Is that okay? After years of juggling child-rearing, shuttling kids to extracurricular activities, and caring for my father-in-law, my husband suddenly proposed a divorce. When I casually agreed to the divorce and mentioned it too lightly, my eldest daughter shouted in surprise. Ethan was alone, celebrating with a fist pump. My eldest daughter seemed not to understand my words, but this is fine. If everything goes as I expect, everything should resolve smoothly. In reality, a month after I blocked his calls, my ex-husband came to our house. I am a 37-year-old part-time worker. I married Ethan, who is 2 years older than me, when I was 24 due to a shotgun wedding, and we were blessed with 2 children after the marriage. Our daughter Kristen, who turns 13 this year, has started middle school, and our son Ted has turned 6 and started elementary school. With the children reaching middle and elementary school ages, childcare should have become a bit easier, but the birth of our second son, Sean, 2 years ago has kept us in a constant state of busyness. However, I have strong support, so I can manage household chores, childcare, and work. Ted. You need your gym bag today, right? Prepare it yourself. I'll prepare it after breakfast. That's what you said last week, but you forgot it, didn't you? Prepare it first. Seeing me always busy, my eldest daughter naturally started to support me. She is already showing the temperament of a tough mother, even more maternal than I am. I rely on my eldest daughter's help with childcare, which honestly helps a lot. However, I also feel pathetic having to rely on a child for help with childcare. Still, I depend on my eldest daughter because I am also caring for George, my father-in-law. Megan, I'm sorry, but I need to go to the toilet. Can you take me? Understood. Let's get up slowly then. I'm always sorry about this. My father-in-law always looks apologetic towards me. However, I have never considered him a burden. Though he requires care, he is only weak in the legs and can manage daily activities with some support. Thus, it's more about support than care, really. George is 70, and my mother-in-law Dorothy is 68. Since my mother-in-law alone can't fully support him, our family has been living with my in-laws for about 3 years now. Living with my in-laws is often fraught with trouble, but fortunately, it hasn't involved me much. Welcome home, thanks for the hard work, Bert. Lunch is ready, you'll eat, right? Thank you. I appreciate it, as always. We're the ones being helped here, don't worry about it. Oh, by the way, I fixed a button on Ted's uniform that had come off. I did it without asking, I hope that was okay? You fixed it? That's very helpful, thank you. My mother-in-law supports us with housework and childcare. Also, my father-in-law entertains my eldest son when he returns from school. When I was pregnant with my second son, they helped me a lot. Though we came to my in-laws to support them, it feels like the roles have completely reversed. Therefore, I feel indebted to my in-laws, but they always say not to worry about it. I'm always causing trouble, I know. Living with your husband's parents must be tough, but you accepted us. I'm truly grateful. That's right. I couldn't support him alone. Besides, we're happy to live with our grandchildren. You might think we're helping you with housework and childcare, but that's not it. We do it because we enjoy it, and it brings us joy. After 3 years of living with my in-laws, I've been leading a busy yet enjoyable life. However, there is one thing I'm concerned about. In these 3 years, my husband's attitude has gradually changed. One morning, it was a usual scene. You didn't hand over the notice from yesterday, did you? I always tell you to make sure to hand it over. I just forgot yesterday. Megan. I'm sorry, but could you buy some sewing thread at the dollar store on your way back from work today? Understood. Could you also buy a new nail clipper? The one we're using now is getting dull. This ordinary scene seems to annoy my husband. You have it good, getting help with the housework and childcare. How can you say that? You don't help, so you wouldn't know, but household chores and childcare are tough. Plus, I even have to go to work. Work. It's just an easy part-time job, isn't it? What's the matter with you? Did something bad happen at work? What? Dad, are you taking it out on us? It's not like that. Some people handle housework, childcare, and work all by themselves, so I just mean don't be too spoiled. After placing his toast back on the plate, my husband left for work. I get complaints from my husband. He seems displeased that I receive help from my eldest daughter and my in-laws. However, since my eldest daughter and in-laws are on my side, my husband often retreats in a bad mood. Feeling uncomfortable without allies, he has started to reduce his time at home. Welcome home. You're late again today. What about dinner? I don't need it. I'm just going to take a shower and go to sleep. My husband comes home late and has started to go out alone on weekends. He sulks because he doesn't have the family's support, although it's his own attitude that causes this, making it feel like a fourth child has emerged. But my husband is almost 40, an adult, and a father. I can't deal with him sulking like a child forever. Hey, even if you don't help with the housework, could you at least help a little with the childcare? Ask your mom and them for that. Kristen has started going to cram school, right? I have to pick her up because she gets home late. And Ted has joined a soccer club, hasn't he? Sometimes on weekends, I have to take him a bit far for practice games. I can't really ask your mother to do the driving, can I? I'm not doing any driving around. Why should I have to drive the kids around at night or on weekends when I'm tired from work? You have a part-time job and you can drive, so you should do it. If I take the kids to and from their activities, I won't be able to do anything at home. I'll have to rely even more on your parents. I understand you're tired from work, but please, help a little. You said you'd help when the kids started their activities, didn't you? I said I'd pay for it. If you can't drive them, then make them quit their activities. My husband's dissatisfaction is directed not only at me, but also at the children who don't take his side. It seems the biggest child of all requires the most attention. Since I can't make the children quit their activities, I decided to handle their transportation myself. But I can't rely on my in-laws any more than I already do. So, I try to keep from adding to their burden as much as possible. However, the driving, taking 1 to 2 hours each time, inevitably cuts into the efficiency of my housework and childcare. To make up for the lost efficiency, I've started waking up early and cutting back on sleep to get housework and childcare done. I use every spare moment for housework and childcare. Exhausted from non-stop housework and childcare, I also go to my part-time job and continue to support my father-in-law. This unsustainable effort can't continue forever. Having reached my limit just on grit, I consulted my husband again, but he flatly refused, saying, "What? I told you I wouldn't do the driving." So, I continue to transport the children, hiding my fatigue. I'm home. Welcome back. Well done, Megan. Are you okay? Isn't the driving tough? I'm fine. I'll get dinner ready. I force a smile to hide my fatigue. I can't rely on my in-laws any more than I already do. I know I should openly rely on my in-laws, but I just can't bring myself to do it. Unfortunately, bad things seem to happen one after another. My father-in-law suddenly passed away from acute myocardial infarction. At the hospital, my daughter, my mother-in-law, and I cried as we looked at my father-in-law, who had passed away in his sleep. My son was teary-eyed and looked down in silence. It's understandable that 2-year-old Sean doesn't grasp the situation and looks confused. However, why is my husband grinning? Well, Dad was over 70, so it can't be helped, right? No more needing to help with the toilet or the bath. Let's try to think positively. My husband is not the kind of person who makes jokes to cheer us up. He probably means what he said. Even if it were a joke, it would be in extremely poor taste. But right now, sadness overwhelmingly outweighs anger. So, we ignored my husband and mourned the loss of my father-in-law. We better get started on the funeral arrangements. Our reaction probably wasn't what he had hoped for. He left the hospital room with a dismissive remark, increasing the emotional distance between us and him. I'll be late again today, so I don't need dinner. 2 years after my father-in-law's death, my husband continues to do as he pleases, still not helping with housework or childcare, and I'm still doing the driving for our 2 children and now also for Sean to kindergarten. Moreover, he comes home later than before, sometimes doesn't return on weekends, and has become even more reckless with money. Hey! Did you use the household money again? So what? Most of that money is what I earned, isn't it? We have 3 kids, you know? We still need a lot of money, so stop wasting it. Shut up. You should just keep quiet and take care of the house. Our relationship had already cooled off. But we haven't divorced yet, partly because of the children, but also because I'm worried about my mother-in-law. I'm sorry that Ethan keeps causing trouble. You can dump him anytime, you know? My mother-in-law sometimes tells me it's okay to divorce, but if we were to divorce, my husband and mother-in-law would be left alone. I'm worried about leaving my kindly mother-in-law alone with such a husband. So, whenever she brings up divorce, I just laugh it off. What are you saying? Even if my relationship with my husband has cooled, having 3 adorable children and a kind mother-in-law is enough for me. However, the time to end such a life has come. My mother-in-law has suffered a stroke. Though her life was saved, my mother-in-law developed cognitive impairment as a result of her condition. The view from that mountain is really beautiful. I really love that view. I went there last week. Wow, really? I'd like to see that view from the mountain someday too. My eldest daughter listens to her grandmother with a smile. However, my mother-in-law did not go to the mountain last week. Due to her cognitive impairment from the stroke, she also has memory issues and talks about trips from years ago as if they happened recently. Moreover, she repeats the same story multiple times. My eldest daughter continues to listen with a smile until my mother-in-law is satisfied. Did Mom finish her meal? It took a long time today. Yeah. But she wasn't slow eating, she was just caught up in her stories. I see. That's a sign she's still energetic. We need to keep her healthy. Right. But I'm a bit worried. Earlier, she reached out her hand to a completely different place from her spoon. To keep her healthy, we need to cover for her like that. I was worried whether I could provide enough support when my mother-in-law fell, but my eldest daughter helps with the caregiving and the household chores, so we're managing. Seeing how my daughter supports me, my eldest son has also started to take care of his younger brother. I've come to realize that this is what it means to support each other as a family. It's just unfortunate that my husband's cooperation isn't part of this. Why doesn't that guy help with anything around the house? Even Ted is looking after Sean. Don't call your father that guy. Father? Can someone like him even be called a father? It's no wonder my eldest daughter is exasperated with her husband. Well, I think it's much better than being bothered by him. My husband still comes home late and goes out on weekends. It's a problem that he spends money, but I'm not interested in what he does outside. So, it's better for me if he just stays uninvolved. Thinking this, I had been ignoring my husband, but about 6 months after my mother-in-law's fall, my husband dropped a huge bombshell on our family. I'm going to remarry my 18-year-old girlfriend. You're in the way, so disappear. What? My husband, returning home after the kids had gone to bed, suddenly confronted me with a divorce. I was speechless, my mind went blank. Though I've been managing household chores, childcare, and work with some help since coming to live with my in-laws. I also took care of my father-in-law, and now I'm caring for my mother-in-law. Do I really have to be confronted with a divorce from a husband who hasn't helped with the house or his parents at all? And to remarry an 18-year-old? No matter how hard I try, I can't understand what my husband is saying. So, you want a divorce, is that it? Exactly. What is that? Don't joke about things like that. I thought she was asleep, but my eldest daughter had been awake. She couldn't stand our conversation and burst in. You guys have always treated me carelessly, haven't you? It's too late to get flustered after I've brought up divorce. What? I'm not flustered at all. I'm actually mad that you brought up divorce to Mom first. My eldest daughter's anger was so strong, I couldn't even talk to my husband. It's nice that she's angry for me, but this could wake up my sons. Kristen, don't raise your voice so much. How can you stay so calm? I'm angry too. First, let your father and I talk, so go back to your room. No. I'm staying here. It seemed my eldest daughter had no intention of leaving the room. She quieted down but crossed her arms and continued to glare at her father without moving. It's not ideal to discuss divorce in front of the kids, but it can't be helped. So, you've been coming home late and going out on weekends for that girlfriend, huh? Yes. We've been together for about a year now. She's a girl who works part-time at my regular pub. Unlike you, she's friendly and kind. That should be called an affair, not a relationship, but that's not the point I want to emphasize. She's still 18, right? Are her parents okay with this? Her parents are strongly opposed. If she marries me, they're going to disown her. How can you marry without her parents' consent? We don't need her parents' consent. We can get married. That's why we've been patiently dating this past year. It's not about the law, but about human connections and decency. I was at a loss, unable to understand my husband. Looking at my daughter's face, she had an expression of complete disbelief. So, her parents don't agree, but you've confirmed her feelings, right? Yes, of course. We love each other. I didn't need to hear that. I don't want her to say too much in front of my daughter. At this point, I don't care about the divorce or the affair. What worries me is my mother-in-law after the divorce. I looked at a photo of my mother-in-law on a shelf in the corner of the room. It was taken when she was healthy, smiling on a mountain hike. Looking at my mother-in-law's smiling face, I remembered she had always said I could leave my husband anytime. Understood. So, shall we get divorced? Oh, you'll grant me a divorce? That makes things easier. What? Mom? Is that okay? My casual agreement to the divorce and my light mention of it shocked my eldest daughter. Ethan was alone, celebrating with a fist pump. I can't accept this. This is fine. What's fine? This is fine. I repeated the same words, trying to communicate with my eyes to my eldest daughter that I wasn't just accepting the divorce. It seemed my feelings had reached her, who had been with me as family. However, my husband, who hadn't been part of us as a family, failed to notice the silent conversation between my daughter and me. If everything goes as I expect, everything should work out smoothly. The decision to divorce is made, but there are children involved, and we need to discuss the details. Therefore, I cannot leave the house immediately. Of course, it's okay for me to take the children, right? Obviously. Better take them away. They're just a nuisance. Understood. But it's impossible to just take the children and leave immediately, so wait a bit. Then, you can stay here until you find a place to move. I'll be spending time with my girlfriend. But get out in 2 weeks. I can't have you sticking around forever. As my husband left the house happily, my eldest daughter looked at me anxiously. It's okay. Do you think a person like that can be happy? Surely, your grandfather in heaven will punish him. I tried to alleviate my daughter's anxiety with a smile. Seeing me smile, she too smiled back, reassured. The next day, I reported the divorce to my mother-in-law. Mother, I'm sorry. I've decided to get a divorce. It's okay. I'm sorry for all the trouble up to now. Though the conversation went on, my mother-in-law probably didn't fully grasp its meaning. Yet, her words were comforting to me. 2 weeks later, I left the house with my 3 children. The place we moved to wasn't far from my in-laws. This was to avoid changing the children's schools and to continue my part-time job, but there was another reason as well. The divorce proceeded smoothly as I didn't press the issue of the affair. I thought it more important to quickly sever ties with my husband and ensure a smooth transition to receiving child support, rather than arguing about compensation. However, in return for not fussing about the affair, I took most of our savings and the car. My ex-husband, eager to start his life with his 18-year-old new wife, accepted these terms without fully understanding how much it would cost him later. Mom, you think about 2 months? I think about 1 month. You think he lacks that much persistence? Surely he can last about 2 months, right? I explained to my daughter why I divorced her father so easily. Satisfied with my explanation, she looked forward to that time. A month after the divorce, my ex-husband called my smartphone. See, just about a month. Not yet. I don't think he's been pushed to his limit yet. Let's wait and see. After that, my ex-husband started bombarding me with calls. At night, he would call every 10 minutes. It became impossible to relax at home, so I blocked his number. Since I had told him where we lived, there wouldn't be a problem if he couldn't reach me by phone. When he was driven to his limit, he would surely come to the house. A month after blocking him, my ex-husband finally showed up at our house. Please. Come back. I was wrong. Through the intercom, my husband pleaded loudly for help. It was night, and to avoid bad rumors in the neighborhood, I reluctantly let him into the house to talk. I sent the younger son to another room with the eldest, and I listened to my ex-husband's story with my daughter. Well, it was probably just as I had expected. I have an idea of what happened, but could you explain it anyway? After you guys left, I started living with my remarriage partner and my mom, just the 3 of us at her home. But the new wife couldn't handle taking care of mom and gave up, right? Yes. I didn't think she'd give up so easily, even middle schooler Kristen could do it. You know. It's obvious, isn't it? Taking care of parents isn't about persistence. Kristen could take care of mom because we've always lived as a family. I could take care of your parents because they were kind to me and felt like my real parents. Did you really think that just getting married and saying, "This is your mother-in-law, take care of her," would work? That is. You probably pushed all the housework onto her too, right? Anyone would hate that. Especially an 18-year-old. So? Did you divorce her already? No, we hadn't registered the marriage yet, we were planning to on our anniversary. Lucky for her, then. She dumped you easily, huh? I've been there, and I know that young women can find older men attractive. I bet the 18-year-old new wife was serious about marrying my ex-husband. Otherwise, she wouldn't have fought her parents' opposition and moved in with my in-laws. She must have been informed about my mother-in-law beforehand. However, the reality of married life and caregiving must have been much harder than she imagined. For an 18-year-old with little life experience, it would be tough to overcome such trials. If they were to make their married life successful, my ex-husband's support would have been crucial, but he helped with nothing. Moreover, it's dubious whether he even explained the situation adequately or prepared her appropriately. But she cut ties with her parents to marry you, right? How are you planning to take responsibility? Her parents said they'd cut ties, but they didn't in the end. Now she's being sheltered by them. Sheltered? What do you mean? Did you? Of course, I went after her when she left the house. But her parents said, "Our daughter is scared, so don't come anymore." This is a marital issue. It's natural for us to discuss it together. Yet, they say if I persist, they'll consult a lawyer. A 40-year-old man pressuring an 18-year-old girl is scary enough. If a daughter runs back home from a man, it's natural for parents to protect her. Moreover, the mention of a lawyer instead of the police shows how serious her parents are. The police cannot act without evidence of harm, but involving a lawyer might make it easier for them to intervene, and even if the police do not act, a civil lawsuit might be possible. Moreover, although people may speak of cutting ties, family bonds are not so easily severed. I cannot imagine ever cutting ties with my children, no matter what they do. However, my ex-husband seems to be someone who can imagine cutting ties with his children. I don't care about you and your new wife anymore. But you came here alone, is Grandma okay? Mom's already asleep, so she's fine. I've also installed a monitoring camera. Grandma is alone at home? I can't believe it. Give me the keys now. My eldest daughter snatched the keys from my ex-husband and rushed to our mother-in-law's place without stopping. What are you thinking? I'm at my limit. Whatever I do, you ask about Megan? About Kristen? About Ted and Sean? Suddenly she starts saying things that make no sense. My wife ran away, and I can't take care of Mom alone anymore. Please, come back. The reason Mom doesn't rely on you and calls our names instead, is it because you couldn't be the family she needed? Being related by blood doesn't make you family. If you were really family, you'd understand what Mom wants to say. Kristen and I have never thought Mom was saying nonsense. Realizing how foolish his actions had been, my ex-husband hung his head and fell silent. If my ex-husband has come to regret his past actions, that's an ideal turn of events for me. I handed him a brochure I had prepared. I have no intention of remarrying you. But you can't take care of Mom, can you? How about we get her into a care facility? I suggested to my ex-husband that we place our mother-in-law in a nearby care facility. It would be much safer for her to be there than with my incapable ex-husband. Additionally, visiting her at the facility would allow us to see her without having to meet my ex-husband. The brochure I handed to my ex-husband was for a facility near our house. We hadn't moved too far away after leaving the marital home, partly for this reason. Okay. I'll do that. With this, I achieved my goal. I managed to divorce and ensure that my children and I could see my mother-in-law whenever we wanted. Shall we head to your house then? What does that mean? My ex-husband, mistakenly thinking that his remorse and regret had moved me, hoped for a positive response. Don't misunderstand. I'm going to pick up Kristen. She rushed out suddenly earlier, and since it's night, even if it's close by, it's natural for me to go pick up our child, right? Realizing he had been mistaken, my ex-husband's shoulders fell. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. It had been 2 months since we last visited the family home, but I didn't meet with my mother-in-law. I simply picked up my eldest daughter and returned home. We can meet with my mother-in-law anytime now, so hearing from my daughter was enough for now. Grandma said she went to the mountain yesterday too. She's still so lively, huh? It's not fair that only sister gets to see Grandma. I wanted to see Grandma too. It's late now, so be patient. We'll be able to see Grandma from now on. It looks like your plan worked, didn't it? Yes, this way I managed to separate that man from Grandma. As I drove home, thinking about being able to meet Grandma again made me happy, and I found myself humming a tune. Later, my mother-in-law was admitted to the care facility. Mother, how are you feeling? Any changes? Yes, I've been feeling quite well recently. According to the staff at the facility, my mother-in-law had been somber and quiet right after admission. However, as my children and I began visiting, her mood lightened and she started talking more. With my mother-in-law in the facility, my ex-husband was left living alone at the family home. It seems he finally gave up on the new wife after her parents threatened to consult a lawyer. I'm just relieved he didn't become a stalker. However, the girl must have been quite frightened. While I understand his desire not to lose a young wife, as an adult, he should have known when to step back. Later, I learned that around the time my ex-husband started complaining and behaving strangely, he had made a major mistake at work. It was a big enough blunder to push him into a less influential position at his company. Feeling ostracized at work while I managed home affairs smoothly with family support apparently didn't sit well with him. As he began to complain, finding no allies at home either, he ended up relying on a teenager. Being relied upon by a younger person probably made him feel validated. Such childish reasons indeed. Also, it seems that not only his wife but also his mother had forsaken him. Nice to meet you. It's a lovely day, isn't it? Despite clearly remembering us, it seems my mother-in-law has forgotten that my ex-husband is her son. His childlike behavior led to our divorce and ultimately left him truly alone. Now alone, my ex-husband's mental state worsened, and he continued to make mistakes at work. One mistake led to another, resulting in demotion and pay cuts. Given his mental state, he probably should take a break from work, but he can't afford to. Since I took most of our savings in exchange for not fussing about the affair during our divorce, he's left without much money. Still, he needs to work to pay the child support for our 3 kids and the care facility fees for my mother-in-law. Being without support is a tough situation. To support the 3 kids, I found a job. Sean is still small, but Kristen and Ted help look after him. Having real support is truly reassuring. Come celebrate Mom's birthday instead of sleeping. The man speaking so freely to me, hospitalized with a high fever, is my husband who always prioritizes his mother. I've decided. I'm done with this husband. He's out of here. But first, let's stir up a little trouble. I am a very bad wife. And a bad daughter-in-law too. My name is Emma. In my 20s, as a single noble office lady, I never scrimped. Back then, buying deli foods from the French restaurants and enjoying a drink on Friday nights was my greatest pleasure. Now, as a frugal 40-year-old, I prefer gulping down sparkling wine. After all, sparkling wine is better than wine. Sometimes I think it might be nice to indulge like the old days. But my cooking skills have improved. Now, it's more fun thinking up menus that surpass those restaurant foods. Cooking isn't fun when it feels like a chore. But it's enjoyable when you aim to make delicious things. I used to hate cooking when I reached my 30s. It felt like mere labor back then. About 10 years ago. 2 years into my marriage. I was grappling with a particular problem, the relationship between my husband, Kevin, and my mother-in-law. Our newlywed life had been nothing but fun for a while. It all started one holiday when my husband spoke to me. Mom, What? My husband, who always calls me Emma, suddenly said Mom. I was shocked and a bit embarrassed, playfully replying, calling me Mom is a bit premature, don't you think? Practicing for when we have kids? To my surprise, he became flustered. Sorry, I mistook you for my mom. Mistakenly calling me Mom. I couldn't believe my ears. It would have been better if he had said it was a rehearsal. My husband had never called his mother Mom in front of me before. Unsatisfied with the mistake, I asked what it meant, and he said, it's a leftover from childhood, I've always called her Mom. Although he corrected it as an adult, it sometimes slips out. Because he doesn't want me to think less of him for it. Among my female friends, many still call their mothers Mom. It didn't seem unusual. and I thought it was fine if there were no problems within the family. However, the fact that my husband still calls his mother Mom left me feeling indescribably disgusted. I couldn't understand why I could forgive my friends but not my husband, but it just felt incredibly wrong. He seemed to feel bad about the mix-up, but that wasn't the point. It was more about the fundamental discomfort I felt. After that, my husband, having let his secret slip, seemed to lose his inhibitions. He began referring to his mother as Mom in the third person more frequently in front of me. And then, another problem arose. Ever since we married, gradually, my mother-in-law seemed to want to meet with my husband frequently, and she began inviting us to her house often. Very often. Originally, my husband had lived at home for a long time. It wasn't that he lived in the countryside, and his job was close to his parents' house. So he didn't need to live alone and could save money. If he hadn't married me, he might have ended up a mama's boy forever. But I had also lived at home for a long time, so it was mutual. However, now I began to wonder if there was another reason for his prolonged home life. Perhaps he loved his mother, or should I say, Mom, too much to leave. Observing my mother-in-law's behavior, it was hard not to think so. At least, it was clear she loved her son very much. I couldn't tell if she was overtly doting, but she certainly wanted to see his face regularly. I understand loving your own child, but he's already a man in his late 20s. It seemed about time for a little child independence, or so I thought, as an outsider. My mother-in-law's welcoming mode knew no bounds. I made Kevin's favorite fried chicken, so come have dinner with us tonight. I found Kevin's favorite snacks on sale, so I bought a lot. Should I bring them over to your place? She kept trying to connect with her son using every trick in the book, and I, getting dragged into it, honestly found it annoying. Mother-in-law, ever heard of personal space? As someone who works in caregiving, going to my in-laws' house at night, or having my mother-in-law visit our home was honestly a hassle. It might sound selfish, but after a draining day at work, I want to relax without having to be considerate of anyone else. Still, it felt cruel to snub my mother-in-law, who was waiting with homemade food. Regrettably, I had told my husband, "It's a bit troublesome to have her come over so often. Why don't you visit your mom by yourself?" I explained to my mother-in-law that I didn't have the physical energy because of my job, and she seemed to understand. Well, it seemed like she didn't care much whether I came or not. Thus, my husband started visiting his parents' house regularly. I thought that settled it, but only briefly. One day, I came home from work to find my mother-in-law in our house. She had been cooking, waiting for us. Apparently, my husband had given her a spare key and told her, "Think of this as your own home." Wait a minute. I hadn't heard a single thing about this. The table was laden with my husband's favorite dishes, fried chicken, hamburgers, and pasta. If you stuck a flag in that ketchup rice, it'd be a perfect kid's meal. Thank you for cooking, but I'm not a child. I had a bad feeling as I cautiously opened the refrigerator and found that 5 days' worth of ingredients had been used up. It's the food for this house, so I thought it was okay to use it as Kevin said. My mother-in-law explained. But I hadn't heard anything about this. Exhausted from work, I felt like my insides were boiling, but I held back. After all, my mother-in-law meant no harm. But that doesn't make it okay. And the worst part wasn't her, it was my husband, who casually okayed everything without consulting me. In the end, my mother-in-law stayed over that night, and returned to her home the next morning. With work looming, I didn't have time to press my husband on why he gave the spare key to his mother. I wanted to discuss this issue as soon as possible. So I set up a time to talk with my husband that evening. Surprisingly, he agreed to the discussion quite easily. "I'm sorry. I'll ask Mom to refrain from using the spare key from now on." He promised me that. But that wasn't really the end of it. Eventually, my mother-in-law started coming to our house once or twice a week to cook and stay over. Unfortunately, my husband hadn't exactly broken his promise. The use of the spare key was to be limited, not forbidden. So that's how it is. Huh? According to my husband, I told her to limit it. But there's nothing I can do if she comes over on her own since she has the key. Are you kidding me? Giving out the spare key was the original mistake. And the person who gave it out is feigning ignorance, which is incredibly infuriating. Moreover, my mother-in-law has taken liberties like rearranging the kitchen and adding kitchenware, treating our house as if it were her own. Am I being too narrow-minded? No, that can't be it. Whose house is this again? It might already be mostly taken over. Proof of that is that my mother-in-law now casually criticizes me. "Oh, Emma, you're using bouillon cubes? Please don't feed Kevin that stuff. I raised him to eat as additive-free as possible." So, the result is a guy who loves kids' meals. I still can't say that. The husband himself chugs juices and supplements full of additives. He loves candy too. My stress had reached its limit. Maybe it would be better to divorce. I've been having sleepless nights. Naturally, my body is screaming. My stomach hurts, and I feel dizzy every day because I can't sleep. Mistakes at work are piling up. Then one day, it seemed my body had reached its limit. I developed a high fever close to 105 degrees. I barely had the energy to crawl. And I would lose consciousness almost immediately if I let my guard down. It's frustrating, but I have no choice but to rely on my husband. "Sorry, my temperature has been fluctuating between 100 and 105 degrees. Could you buy me some cooling sheets and a sports drink?" Panting, I desperately told my husband. But his response was far beyond what I had expected. "What are you talking about? We had a dinner planned at my parents' house today." Huh? What is he talking about? I try to recall, and indeed, I remember that during her last visit, my mother-in-law had said, "Let's have a dinner party at our place next time." She was excited, planning to invite my sister-in-law and her family for a fun gathering. Do you even understand my condition right now? I respond, barely able to breathe. My husband then says, "Well, I'll just go by myself then. See you." And he leaves for work, completely ignoring my request for him to buy some essentials. Doesn't he care that his wife is suffering from a high fever? Is a dinner with his mom that important? Unbelievable. It was a mistake to rely on him. I crawl back into bed, wondering if I might not wake up this time. But I do wake up. The first things I see are the stark white ceiling and curtains. It seems I'm alive, but where am I? This isn't home. My husband peers into my face, smiling, "You're awake." Where am I? At the hospital. I was really shocked. When I came home, you were collapsed in the hallway. I collapsed? Yeah, you seemed to be in agony from a high fever. Maybe you went downstairs to get some water and collapsed near the kitchen. I don't even remember if I was trying to get water. The fever must have reached a life-threatening level. I instinctively feel relieved that I woke up safely. I'm showing symptoms of dehydration. And I have no strength in my body. My stomach has been upset recently. And I feel completely wrecked. It's decided that I need to stay hospitalized for a few days to be observed. 3 days into my hospital stay, the day before I'm supposed to be discharged, my husband calls me. I wonder what it's about. Are you still sleeping? It's Mom's birthday, get up and come celebrate. Huh? I'm stunned by my husband's angry voice over the phone. Telling me, who couldn't even bathe until yesterday due to a fever, to come celebrate Mom's birthday. Is he stupid? There's no way I can go. Besides, they just had a dinner party and now a birthday party? They could have combined them. I swallow all my complaints and respond with a logical argument. I've been hospitalized. There's no way I'm recovered. But my husband replies, it's just the flu, get over it quickly. True, the diagnosis is influenza. But I believe my weakened immune system is due to recent stress. Whose fault does he think that is? He dismissively says it's just the flu. However, my husband doesn't consider my feelings and says, you didn't come to the last meal, so you owe it to them. That's it. I'm done. I'm saying goodbye to a husband who prioritizes his mom over me. Did you say something? Nothing. It seems my husband missed my muttered words. Well, that's more convenient for me. I simply tell him, I'll make sure to visit your parents' house once I'm discharged. And hang up unilaterally. Perhaps upset by how I ended the call. My husband doesn't come to pick me up on the day of my discharge. Well, I don't care. Holding all my belongings from the hospital stay, I head to my in-laws' house. Oh, Emma, are you okay? My mother-in-law greets me with a surprised face. Thank you. I'm fully recovered now. I'm sorry for missing your birthday and the dinner party. That's fine, you must be tired. Come on in. While she is kind in demeanor, her expression clearly reads, it's not really pleasant having just the daughter-in-law over. She really doesn't mind that I missed the birthday and dinner parties. After making small talk with my in-laws for a bit, I soon left their house. My home is nearby, but I decided to stop by the local municipal office first. Back at home for the first time in a while, I quickly pack my things while my husband is away. I leave the divorce papers I just picked up on the table. Everything is ready. Then, my phone rings from my mother-in-law's number. I ignore it at first as it keeps ringing, and soon I see almost 20 missed calls. I finally answer, and to my surprise, it's my husband's voice over the phone. What's this about? Dear, why are you calling from your mother's phone? What do you mean, what's this about? What's this letter? Oh, you've read it then. A grin escapes me as my husband speaks. Then, apparently snatching the phone from him, my mother-in-law demands, is this true? Yes, it is. So, in the background, my husband shouts, Mom, it's not like that. But she seems not to hear him. That's because, when I left their house, I left a letter detailing the truth about my husband. At first, I was completely deceived. But actually, my husband isn't mom first. He's just pretending to be, while he's actually extremely annoyed by his mother. I overheard him talking on the phone with someone who seemed to be his junior. I'll treat you next time. What? Money? Oh, I can get as much as I need from my mom. No problem. Seriously, parents are like ATMs. At first, I thought I misheard. But it seems this is indeed how he feels. He finds his non-independent mother annoying, but lets her have her way to get an allowance. He gave out our house keys because he wanted more pocket money than usual. Apparently, he had been receiving about $1,000 a month from his mother, who is into stocks. However, with the truth now exposed to his mother, and having kept his true feelings hidden from his sister-in-law and father-in-law, he's been regretting and stressing over the increased interactions with his mother. Why would you? My mother-in-law is speechless. And that person, your son, he's quit his job, you know. What? My mother-in-law is dumbfounded, and my husband is desperate. What are you talking about? When she asks him if he's quit his job, he falls silent. I've been getting his resignation papers and pension book at home, so it's undeniable. You thought you were hiding it from me. But when we live in the same house, you can't hide anything. The call goes almost silent on the family's end. They probably put me on speaker, so everyone heard what I said. My husband mutters, well, that there were circumstances. Yes, gambling at the casino during work hours, important circumstances, right? That's why you got fired, isn't it? You were telling your junior about it. Hey. My husband panics, and my in-laws are appalled. Kevin, you liked gambling? You were hiding that from me? In response to my question, my husband hesitated and said, well. When pressed by his father to give a clear answer, he began, actually. It seems my husband has been a fan of gambling since his college days. He had kept it a secret from both me and his family, sneaking off to casinos during work breaks, so no one knew about his gambling habit. His workplace was fairly lax, and there were others doing similar things. At first, his results at work were good enough that his behavior was overlooked. However, as he gained more responsibilities at work after we got married, it became harder for him to visit casinos, which only increased his desire to gamble. Eventually, he lost control, spending more and more time at the parlors during work hours, until it was noticed by his workplace. Despite repeated warnings, he continued his long visits to casinos during work hours, and was finally fired. No company pays a salary for gambling. I'm just too tired of your duplicity and our life together. As I spoke my truth, my husband raised his voice. Even so, what's this divorce paper? Divorce is too extreme. Think it over. I'll think it over. I've thought it over just now, and I still want a divorce. You haven't thought it over at all. Are you seriously telling me to reconsider? Staying with an unemployed gambler who lies and didn't care even when I was dying? Instead of my husband, it was his mother who agreed with me. Yes, she's right. What, Mom? Aren't you on my side? I'm just an ATM to you, right? Automatic teller. Mom, that's what you think. After all the pain I went through to give birth to you. No, I mean, you're important to me, Mom. Then Emma's claims are false? Of course. Why did you panic then? When I read this letter, and immediately went to your house to ask you, Kevin, you looked pale. That is. Sigh. Your inability to answer says it all. It seems Emma was telling the truth. Wait, Mom. Give back all the money I've given you. Wait. Think it over, okay? I don't care anymore. Mom. I'm sorry. As I almost burst out laughing at the desperate exchange between my husband And his straightforward mother, I said. So, I'm divorcing you, but just so you know, I'll be asking for a division of property without considering your financial situation. My husband was at a loss for words, and on the other end of the phone. His father was laughing, "It's your own fault," while his mother was likely speechless, thinking, "There's no defending him now." Thus, my husband lost the trust of his mother, the support of his father, and me, his wife. All that remained was the debt he owed to his mother. After that, as you know, I'm not mom first. I want to change my ways, let's try again. My husband repeatedly begged for reconciliation, but I naturally refused. The problem wasn't that he prioritized his mother, it was that he was full of lies. Such an untrustworthy man is not suitable as a partner. When I firmly told him this, he seemed deeply shocked and never asked for reconciliation again. The discussion about reconciliation had been muddy, and it was hard to get him to agree to the divorce, but it was successfully finalized. He has to repay the money to his mother and is now desperately working at his new job, which pays less than his previous one, and he is being scolded by younger supervisors. Well, it's a good experience for a pampered husband. His mother has also become distanced from her sister-in-law's family due to this incident. Disgusted, his father started spending less time at home, leading to a much lonelier life than before. Well, she still has her beloved son, hopefully. His affection returns to her. Meanwhile, I started managing a cat cafe with the money I saved from work. Honestly, there's hardly any profit. It's mostly break-even or a loss due to the expenses of caring for rescue cats. But it's fulfilling, and I feel like I'm gaining something more important than money, knowing I'm helping the cats. Although I'm single, the cats are like family to me. That's what I thought. But recently I had a big argument with someone from an NPO doing cat rescue work about strategies to protect cats. Normally, I'd think, I'll never deal with this person again. However, we both deeply care about animals and oddly hit it off. We're not dating, but we've started going out for meals together, and I can feel his kindness. For my birthday, he gave me a cat mug that matches his. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe, just maybe, something could happen. Just kidding.
I could feel the anger boiling inside me as I listened to the lewd sounds coming through Brent's phone speaker. My husband's deep, throaty groans intermingled with the unmistakable high-pitched gasps of a woman who definitely wasn't me. "Oh, Brent, you feel so good," the woman purred, her voice dripping with lust. I wanted to smash the phone against the wall, but I forced myself to remain still and silent, clutching the device tightly as waves of nausea washed over me. When the call finally ended, I took a deep, shuddering breath, fighting back tears. How could he do this to me, to our family? After 15 years of marriage and giving him everything, this was how he repaid my devotion? The lies, the business trips, the unexplained credit card charges, it all made sense now. My heart pounded with a mixture of rage and devastation as I confronted the harsh reality. Brent was having an affair. I spent the rest of that night pacing restlessly, my mind racing as I replayed the sordid conversation over and over. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to scream and hurl accusations. But the other part knew I needed to stay calm, to gather evidence before he inevitably denied everything. When Brent finally returned home 2 days later, I steeled myself, forcing a tight-lipped smile as he bounded through the door with his usual charisma. "Hey, babe, I missed you." He pulled me into an embrace, his aftershave filling my nostrils and making me gag silently. I returned the hug stiffly, all the while imagining wrapping my hands around his lying throat and squeezing until his deceptive tongue lolled out. "Everything okay?" he asked, sensing my tension. His concerned facade only fueled my fury. Just tired? I lied smoothly, mirroring the ease with which he'd clearly been deceiving me. Welcome home. As he headed upstairs to shower, I felt a surge of resolve coursing through me. I would uncover every sordid detail of Brent's betrayal. And when I did, he would face the consequences, severe, brutal consequences, for shattering the sacred vows he had sworn to me. Brent's carefree whistling echoed down the stairwell, but I heard only the faint rumblings of karma's approach, slowly gathering like an inescapable storm on the horizon. I took a deep breath and steeled myself before entering the living room. Phone in hand with the damning recording queued up, Brent was lounging on the couch, idly flipping through channels. "We need to talk," I stated firmly. He glanced up with a bemused expression. "What's up, babe?" Rather than answering, I hit play on the audio file. The unmistakable sounds of his aroused groans and the mystery woman's breathy moans filled the air. Brent's face drained of color as the recording played. When it finished, I fixed him with a cold stare. "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" He opened and closed his mouth wordlessly for a moment, before regaining his composure. "Candace, that was just a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe that was a one-time slip-up?" Brent rose from the couch, hands raised placatingly. "Baby, I swear, it was nothing but a drunken fling during that conference in Phoenix. It'll never happen again." "Don't lie to me," I shouted, nostrils flaring. "I know about the hotel receipts, the suspicious credit card charges. How long has this been going on?" He shook his head vehemently. "No, you've got it all wrong." "Save it," I cut him off, feeling disgusted. "I can't even look at you right now." Turning on my heel, I stormed out of the room, slamming the door to the guest bedroom behind me. I collapsed onto the bed, hot tears of anger and humiliation streaming down my cheeks. How dare he try to gaslight me, to make me feel crazy for catching him red-handed? My body shook with rage at the thought of all the lies, all the times he had smiled in my face while carrying on a tawdry affair behind my back. But I refused to be the victim anymore. I would expose Brent for the unfaithful snake that he was, gathering undeniable proof to shove in his smug face. Over the next few weeks, I documented everything, poring over bank statements, installing tracking software on his phone and computer, even hiring a private investigator to follow his movements. The evidence mounted rapidly. Hotel receipts, incriminating emails and texts, even video footage of him kissing and groping the woman, who I learned was his co-worker Amber, in a dimly lit parking garage. When I finally amassed the extensive file, I waited until Brent was home from another one of his frequent business trips. Dylan was spending the night at a friend's, giving us privacy. "We're through," I stated coldly, tossing the thick manila envelope onto the coffee table in front of Brent. "I know everything." His eyes went wide as he flipped through the photos, videos, documents, and other proof within. "Candace, I can explain." I held up a hand, silencing him. "Save your breath. The lies stop now." For the first time, Brent seemed to realize I wasn't bluffing or exaggerating. The smug mask slipped, revealing the cowering coward underneath. What are you going to do?" he asked meekly. A vindictive smile crossed my lips as I leaned back in my chair. "Don't you worry," I purred darkly. "You're about to face some severe consequences." Despite the mountain of evidence I had gathered proving his infidelity, Brent continued to deny and downplay his affair with Amber. Lie after shameless lie poured from his mouth as he desperately tried to gaslight me into doubting the truth right in front of my eyes. "It was just a fling, a stupid mistake," he would claim, as if that absolved him of betraying his marriage vows. Other times he would insist, "We're just friends. There's nothing going on." I wanted to scream at the blatant falsehoods. How dare he treat me like an imbecile after I had caught him red-handed? Part of me was tempted to leak the evidence online for the world to see, to utterly humiliate him. But I held back, knowing I needed to bide my time for the perfect moment to strike. In the meantime, I began compiling an even more extensive file on Brent's misdeeds. I installed hidden cameras and microphones around the house, recording his every move. Our teenage son Dylan even helped, using his tech skills to hack into Brent's emails and messaging apps. "I can't believe Dad would do this," Dylan said sadly one day after uncovering yet another explicit exchange between Brent and his mistress. I pulled my son into a tight hug, my heart breaking for the disillusionment he was experiencing at such a young age. "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way," I told him gently. "But we can't let your father's lies tear this family apart. We have to fight back." Dylan nodded resolutely. "Don't worry, Mom. We're going to take that cheating scumbag down." With my son's help, the file on Brent's indiscretions grew thicker by the day. Incriminating photos, videos, emails, credit card statements, we collected it all, documenting his every transgression in preparation to obliterate his life. But still, Brent persisted in lying through his teeth whenever I confronted him, doubling down on his fabrications with almost sociopathic ease. "You're being paranoid and crazy," he would snap whenever I tried to reason with him. "There's no one else, you're imagining things." The gaslighting was maddening, making me question my own sanity at times despite the overwhelming proof I possessed. How could someone I had loved and trusted for so long deceive me so callously? The final straw came at Brent's family reunion over 4th of July weekend. As we mingled with his relatives at the backyard barbecue, I watched in horrified disgust as he blatantly flirted with Amber right in front of me, his wandering hands leaving no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Rage boiled in my veins as I stormed over and shoved him away from the smirking woman. "Get your hands off my husband, you home-wrecking whore!" I shouted, the vicious words ripping from my throat before I could stop them. Brent tried to defuse the situation, laughing it off as a misunderstanding to his oblivious family members. But I was done playing his game. Grabbing the thick file from my purse, I flung it down on the picnic table, photos and documents spilling out, displaying the lurid evidence for all to see. "Take a good look, everyone," I spat venomously, whirling on my astonished in-laws. "This is the kind of man your son really is, a lying, cheating scumbag who's been having an affair with this woman for over a year." Pandemonium erupted as Brent's relatives gasped and shouted in shock and anger. But I didn't care. I was past the point of protecting him or preserving his pristine reputation. He had made his bed, and now it was time to lie in it, no matter how publicly humiliating the consequences would be. The backyard erupted into chaos as I exposed Brent's sordid affair to his entire family. His parents and siblings recoiled in shock and disgust, gawking at the incriminating photos and documents strewn across the picnic table. "How could you, Brent?" his mother wailed, burying her face in her hands. "After everything your father and I did for you." Brent's dad shook his head slowly, a look of utter revulsion on his weathered face. "You're a disgrace, son. I didn't raise you to be this kind of man." But Brent didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He simply sneered at me with contempt blazing in his eyes. "You crazy bitch," he snarled, spit flying from his lips. "You're going to regret this." Before anyone could react, he lunged across the table and grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanking me towards him until our faces were mere inches apart. The stench of beer and barbecue sauce wafted from his mouth as he hissed, "You think you've won? This isn't over." I stared defiantly into his crazed eyes, refusing to show fear despite my heart thundering in my chest. "I'm done with your lies, Brent. Our marriage is over, and so are you." Dylan suddenly appeared, shoving his father away from me with surprising force. "Get your hands off her!" he shouted, positioning himself protectively in front of me. Brent stumbled backwards, nearly toppling the table with the evidence in his drunken rage. Amber was at his side in an instant, clinging to his arm. "Come on, baby, let's get out of here," she crooned, shooting me a smug look over her shoulder. A chorus of outraged shouts and insults followed them as they stormed away. Brent's brother Chris stepped towards me, shaking his head in disbelief. "I'm so sorry, Candace," he murmured, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "If we had known, this is unforgivable." I nodded mutely, fighting back tears as the gravity of the situation hit me. My life as I knew it was over, but it was a life built on lies and deceit anyway. As much as it hurt, I knew I was doing the right thing. In the days that followed, the rest of Brent's family reached out in turn to express their shock and lend their support. Even his own parents, initially defensive of their son, came to realize the extent of his betrayal as they pored over the damning proof I had gathered. "We had no idea he was capable of such depravity," Brent's mother told me, her voice laced with a heartbroken waver. "You didn't deserve any of this." I accepted their apologies stoically, appreciative of their kindness, yet numb to offering any absolution for Brent's actions. As far as I was concerned, he had committed the ultimate sin by breaking his sacred vows, and he would pay dearly for it. True to his vile nature, Brent remained utterly unrepentant in the aftermath of his exposure, attempting to gaslight and manipulate me into doubting the truth yet again. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," he claimed during one heated argument, his arrogance infuriating. "It was just a fling, it's not that serious." I could barely contain my fury as I hurled his words back in his face. "Not that serious? You disrespected me, your family, our entire marriage vows, all for some cheap fling with a woman you couldn't even be faithful to." Brent's eyes narrowed to slits as he stepped towards me, his body tensed with menace. "You'll regret this," he growled, each word dripping with venom. "I'm going to make you suffer for humiliating me like this." But I refused to be intimidated by his empty threats any longer. I had the truth on my side now, along with his own flesh and blood, who had disowned him for his disgusting misdeeds. "No, Brent," I replied coldly, staring him down with flinching. "The only one suffering will be you. I'm going to destroy every single part of your pathetic life, and I'm going to make sure you deserve every agonizing second of it." After the explosive confrontation at Brent's family reunion, there was no going back. The bridges had been burned, the truth laid bare for all to see. His parents disowned him, his siblings wanted nothing to do with him, even his own flesh and blood had turned their backs in utter disgust. But Brent didn't seem fazed by the fallout. If anything, he seemed to revel in the chaos, lashing out with bitter vitriol and doubling down on his reprehensible behavior. "They're all a bunch of self-righteous hypocrites." He sneered when I informed him that his parents were cutting him off financially. "I don't need their money or their fake love." His callousness was appalling, devoid of any remorse for the devastation he had wrought. It became increasingly clear that appealing to his humanity was a fruitless endeavor. He simply had none left. As the divorce proceedings began, Brent fought me viciously on every front, determined to make me suffer, even as the world crumbled around him. He drained our joint accounts, attempted to hide assets, and even leveled false accusations in an effort to turn our son Dylan against me. "Your mother's a lying, vindictive snake," he hissed after I caught him trying to manipulate Dylan. "Don't let her turn you against your own father." But Dylan wasn't having any of it. Now 17, he had witnessed firsthand the depths of Brent's depravity and betrayal. If anything, it had strengthened the bond between my son and I, a united front against his father's toxic influence. "I don't know who you are anymore, Dad," Dylan said sadly, shaking his head. "But I want no part of this ugliness." With each despicable act, each pathetic attempt to drag us all down with him, my rage toward Brent calcified into an icy, simmering hatred. I found myself obsessively strategizing, plotting out every move to obliterate him, financially, socially, psychologically. It became my singular driving force, an all-consuming quest to make him feel even an ounce of the pain and humiliation he had inflicted upon me and our family. Brent's smug arrogance would be his undoing. I would savor every moment of stripping that away as he lost everything. When the judge ultimately ruled in my favor, awarding me the house and primary custody of Dylan, Brent remained defiant, even as his life crumbled around him. "This isn't over, you psychotic bitch," he snarled, spittle flying as he was led away by the bailiffs. "I'll make sure you regret ever crossing me." His threats might have once filled me with dread, but now I simply laughed in his bloated, twisted face. "Regret?" I called out mockingly. "I'm just getting started, Brent. This is only the beginning of what you deserve." And I meant every word. Exposing his lies and driving away his family and friends was just the opening salvo. I had so much more in store for the man who had so callously shattered the sacred vows between us. As I watched him being dragged away, I felt a savage sense of satisfaction, of karma being served, however cruelly. This was precisely what he deserved after the turmoil and devastation he had wrought with his selfish actions. Turning away, I wrapped an arm around Dylan's shoulders, the two of us standing united against the storm Brent had unleashed through his sins. There would be no remorse, no looking back. Only the total and complete obliteration of the man who had dared to betray our family's trust in the most unforgivable way. Whatever revenge lay ahead, he had more than earned every agonizing second of it. With the divorce finalized and Brent out of our home, I could finally turn my full attention to systematically dismantling every aspect of his miserable life. He thought he had been through hell already? He had no idea what fresh agonies awaited him. My first target was his career at the prestigious corporate firm where he had been employed for over a decade. Brent had always taken immense pride in his position and paycheck, lording his success over others as proof of his importance. Well, it was time to strip that arrogance away once and for all. Utilizing the evidence I had gathered of his affair with Amber, I compiled a comprehensive file documenting how he had been neglecting his duties and misusing company resources to facilitate his indiscretions. Explicit photos, video recordings, emails, all of it, tallying up the sordid details of his unprofessional conduct. I also enlisted the aid of an old friend, a skilled hacker who owed me a favor, to covertly access the company's internal communications and HR files. With his help, I was able to insert the incriminating dossier directly into their systems, ensuring it would be found. Within a week, the firm's CEO himself was calling Brent into his office, the file of evidence splayed out on the desk between them. "What is the meaning of this, Brent?" The CEO's voice could be heard saying sternly over the recording I had my hacker obtain. "This is utterly unacceptable behavior for one of our senior executives. Sir, I can explain." Brent stuttered, suddenly sounding very small. "Explain what?" the CEO interrupted sharply. "These photos, videos, all this proof of you carrying on illicit affairs and neglecting your responsibilities, using company property for your indecent trysts?" There was a pause, and I could practically see Brent squirming in discomfort. Good. Let him feel just an ounce of the shame and humiliation he deserved. "You're fired, effective immediately," the CEO stated, his voice laced with finality and disgust. "Security will escort you off the premises. I want you gone within the hour." The recording clicked off, and I felt a savage surge of satisfaction. That high-paying job, that status and sense of self-worth Brent derived from his career, all of it gone in an instant because of his own reprehensible actions. But I wasn't done by any means. No, this was just the start of his downfall. Next, I recruited Dylan's help to release the entire file across Brent's social media accounts and professional networking sites like LinkedIn. Within hours, the lurid details of his infidelity went viral as outraged friends, family, and colleagues shared and reacted in shock and horror. Amber's husband even reached out, thanking me profusely after discovering the truth about his wife's tawdry dalliances. Their divorce proceedings began immediately. As for Brent, his phone was blowing up constantly with anguished texts and voice messages from all corners of his life. Parents disowning him, friends cutting ties, colleagues aghast at his indecent behavior. In one particularly satisfying instance, I patched his mother's tearful tirade onto the house speakers so we could both savor every blistering second of it. "You were my pride and joy," the woman wept brokenly. "But now, you're nothing to me, nothing but a filthy, immoral disappointment." I could see it all clicking into place for Brent in that moment, the total and complete ruination I had meticulously orchestrated. His entire world was crumbling into ashes before his very eyes. When he finally looked up at me with naked fear and loathing, I simply smiled. "Like I told you before," I said calmly, "this is only the beginning of what you deserve." With Brent's career, reputation, and family ties in ruins, I turned my sights to obliterating what little he had left, his finances and assets. He would be left with nothing, forced to start from less than zero after the hell I put him through. It began with liquidating our joint accounts and investment portfolios that I had access to through our marriage. Hundreds of thousands of dollars drained in a matter of days, transferred discreetly to offshore holdings where he could never trace it. "What did you do?" Brent demanded frantically when he realized our nest egg was gone. "Where's all our money?" I simply smiled placidly. "Considering how I earned every penny of that while you were gallivanting with your whores, I'd say it's finders keepers." His face purpled with rage, but I was prepared for his outburst. With a flick of my wrist, I produced a crisp manila envelope, a dossier detailing every single asset in his name that I intended to systematically demolish. "This is just a taste of what's coming for you," I said coolly. "You're going to lose it all by the time I'm through." True to my word, I deployed every underhanded tactic in the book to unravel the few holdings Brent had managed to siphon away and hide from me. With Dylan's tech-savvy assistance, we relentlessly hacked and probed until we discovered every last possession he tried to salt away. The classic '68 Mustang he had lovingly restored? Reported as a stolen vehicle until it was seized. The private investment funds he had stashed overseas? Drained away by my hacker contacts until not a cent remained. Even the house he tried to rent after being forced from our marital home. I made sure the landlord received an anonymous tip that Brent was an adulterer of the worst kind. He was kicked out within a month. With each successive blow I landed, stripping away his assets and driving him towards bankruptcy, the fight seemed to gradually drain from Brent's body. What was once a sneering, arrogant puffery became a hunched, haggard shell of a man. He would call or text me at all hours, devolving from bitter threats to pathetic pleadings as his life crumbled around him. "Candace, please?" He sobbed one night during a tear-filled voicemail. "I'm so sorry for what I did. You have to stop this. I have nothing left. I'll be destitute." I listened to the message impassively before deleting it without a shred of remorse. Brent's suffering was a calculated, perfectly engineered campaign, and it was nowhere near finished. When his car was finally repossessed and his cell phone cut off for lack of payment, he started showing up at my doorstep, begging to be let inside. "I have nowhere to go," he wailed, pounding on the door with gnarly fists. "You've taken everything from me. Why are you doing this?" I watched him through the security camera, taking perverse satisfaction in his total and complete debasement. This was the great Brent Connors, the corporate hotshot and arrogant cheater, reduced to a sniveling, desperate husk. When Dylan emerged from his room to see what the commotion was, I waved him off. "Don't bother," I told my son calmly. "He's just reaping what he's sown. That's all." My final salvo came in the form of a massive data dump to the IRS. Records upon records of Brent's financial misdeeds, from tax evasion to money laundering. Within days, the authorities were at his ramshackle motel room with warrants and cuffs. The sight of his utter humiliation as they hauled him away almost made the entire grueling process worth it. Almost. Months passed as the full weight of my revenge campaign against Brent took hold. With each day that went by, he plummeted further into the abyss of destitution and ruin I had meticulously constructed. The corporate job, the money, the family, the home, it had all been systematically stripped away through my calculated efforts. Even his freedom was temporarily revoked after that IRS raid, though his high-priced lawyers managed to get the charges reduced to a slap on the wrist. But it didn't matter. The damage was already done. Brent was a shell of his former arrogant self, having lost every single thing that had once brought him swagger and self-worth. I savored every agonizing second as the proud, selfish man who had so callously shattered his marriage vows was ground down into broken submission. This was karma's bitter reward for his sins against me and our family. Dylan and I, meanwhile, were finally able to start fresh without the toxic weight of Brent's betrayal dragging us down. With my revenge complete and his own misdeeds having alienated him from everyone he knew, he was officially expunged from our lives like the cancer he was. We moved from our old home into a new place. A clean slate for just the two of us to begin rebuilding. Dylan seemed to thrive without his father's negative influence, excelling in school and landing a prestigious internship in software engineering. As for me, I had never felt more liberated and vindicated. The rage that had fueled my quest for vengeance had burned itself out, leaving only a sense of tranquility and peace in its wake. That is, until the incessant phone calls and unwanted visits began. At first, Brent's attempts to reach out were easy enough to ignore. Drunken voicemails pleading for mercy or hurling bitter curses that he had brought upon himself. I would simply delete the messages without a second thought. But then he started showing up in person, loitering outside our new home or accosting us in public with his disheveled, haunted appearance. Each time I saw that sunken, desperate look in his rheumy eyes, any lingering pity I might have felt quickly evaporated. "I have nothing left because of you," he sobbed during one such confrontation outside the grocery store. "You've destroyed me completely." Grabbing my arm with shocking force, Brent stared at me with an almost feral desperation. "Please, give me another chance," he begged hoarsely. "I'll do anything, Candace. Anything to get my life back." I could feel Dylan tense beside me, ready to intervene, but I simply wrenched my arm free of Brent's grasp and stared at him with utter contempt. "Your life?" I spat out a bitter laugh. "This is exactly what you deserve after throwing away the life we had for some cheap fling. You did this to yourself." Brent opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off with a savage glare. "I gave you chance after chance to come clean, to make things right," I said, voice low and laced with venom. "But you just couldn't stop lying and cheating, could you? You chose this path, and I made sure you suffered every agonizing step of the way." Straightening up, I turned and began walking back towards the car where Dylan waited, leaving Brent crumpled on the sidewalk like the pathetic, broken shell of a man he had become. As we drove off, I felt an immense weight finally lift from my shoulders. The long, arduous road towards justice and reclaiming my life had finally reached its conclusion. Brent was neutralized, relegated to a cautionary tale of how swiftly karma can dismantle even the proudest of narcissists. I looked over at Dylan, my strong, resilient son, and smiled. We had each other, and that was enough to forge ahead into our new chapter, free of Brent's toxicity at long last. No more looking back, only moving forward, towards the fresh start this long-overdue vengeance had afforded us.
Everyone looked up to Kelly Cohen because of her tenacity and willpower. She was 34 years old and had spent the majority of her life in the bustling city of San Francisco. Kelly wasn't simply another face in the crowd. She was a self-reliant, diligent individual who had overcome obstacles in life to establish a prosperous career for herself. But there were challenges along the way in her journey. As the only child of Dr. William Cohen and Margaret Cohen, Kelly was raised in a loving household. Both were well-regarded medical professionals who operated a private clinic in the center of the city. Kelly was exposed to discussions about medicine and helping people from an early age, which had a significant impact on her perspective on life. Although Kelly's parents wanted her to follow in their footsteps, she decided against it. She got a position at a prestigious software company after earning her degree in computer technology. She was promoted over the years as a result of her abilities and commitment, and she quickly rose to the position of team lead, overseeing a skilled group of developers and managing challenging projects. Kelly maintained her groundedness in spite of her career success. Her father instilled in her the belief that relationships are more important than accomplishments. Her family was her entire universe as a child, not just a source of support. Kelly had a particularly close relationship with her father, who frequently gave her life lessons on lengthy rides or peaceful evening walks. On the other side, her mother gave her emotional support and always pushed her to reach new heights and follow her aspirations. But when Kelly lost her mother in a terrible vehicle accident in her mid-20s, her life took a devastating turn. Kelly and her father were heartbroken by the unexpected loss. Their once vibrant home felt empty for a long time. However, Kelly leaned on her father for support and found comfort in her profession rather than allowing grief to control her. They overcame the challenging times together, leaning on one another for support. Years later, tragedy struck once more, right as Kelly believed life was settling into a predictable pattern. A terminal cancer diagnosis was made for her father, who had supported her through everything. Kelly was devastated by the news. It hurt to see her father, who had previously been so vibrant, progressively deteriorate. However, Kelly remained loyal to herself and did not allow her feelings to control her. She made sure her father felt loved and cared for by spending as much time as she could with him. Kelly stayed a fighter despite all the highs and lows. She was a strong, compassionate, and determined lady whose traits would soon be put to the test in ways she never could have predicted. During one of the most difficult times in her life, Kelly met Jack Turner. Her mother had passed away unexpectedly not long before, and the loss was too much to take. Kelly was just trying to keep herself together and help her father at the moment, not seeking friendship. However, Destiny had other ideas. At a casual meal, Jack introduced himself to Kelly through a mutual friend, and his laid-back demeanor immediately put her at ease. Jack's ability to make others laugh and his cool head stood in sharp contrast to Kelly's mental turmoil. Instead of avoiding her sorrow or attempting to ignore it, he listened to her with patience as she related tales of her mother and the loss she was finding difficult to comprehend. "You don't need to go through this alone, Kelly," was a common statement made by Jack, and eventually it started to seem like a promise. Their bond developed organically. Jack established himself as a constant in her life, providing assistance when she most needed it. He encouraged her to take breaks from work, gave her coffee on hectic mornings, and even assisted her father with errands when Kelly was feeling overburdened. It meant the world to Kelly that he was not only kind to her, but also to her family. Like chapters in a well-written book, their relationship's milestones came and went as their love became stronger. At a peaceful picnic in Golden Gate Park 2 years after they first met, Jack asked Kelly to marry him. Simple, sincere, and passionate, it was the ideal gesture for them, not a big show with fireworks or a throng. Kelly thought she had found someone who would support her no matter what, so she said yes without hesitation. Her father, still grieving the loss of his wife, was overjoyed to see his daughter finding happiness again. However, not everything about their journey was smooth. When Kelly met Jack's mother for the first time, she couldn't ignore the nagging sense of unease. Mina Turner was a striking woman with sharp features and an even sharper tongue. Divorced from Jack's father, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who always got what she wanted. But her words often felt like daggers cloaked in silk. "So this is Kelly," Mina had said during their first meeting, her eyes scanning Kelly from head to toe. "You're a little older than I expected for Jack, aren't you? But I suppose brains make up for looks in some cases." Kelly was stunned by the comment, but chose to remain polite, determined to make a good impression. Jack quickly stepped in to defend her, mentioning Kelly's career achievements and her family's respected background. While Mina's attitude softened after hearing about Kelly's financial stability, the exchange left Kelly feeling uneasy. It was clear that Mina's approval came with strings attached. Despite this rocky start, Kelly chose to focus on her future with Jack, hoping that any tensions with his mother would ease over time. What she didn't realize was that this was only the beginning of a much larger challenge. Kelly and Jack's married life began on a high note. They moved into a beautiful apartment in San Francisco that Kelly's father had gifted them as a wedding present. It was modern, spacious, and filled with possibilities for a happy future. Kelly dreamed of creating a warm, loving home where they could build their life together. In the beginning, everything seemed promising. Jack would occasionally surprise Kelly with small gestures, like bringing flowers or planning a casual date night, which made her believe they were settling into a perfect partnership. However, as the honeymoon phase began to fade, Kelly noticed cracks in their life together. While she juggled a demanding job in tech and household responsibilities, Jack's carefree attitude toward their new life started becoming more apparent. Before their marriage, Jack had always appeared supportive and kind. But after moving in together, Kelly realized he had little experience with basic household responsibilities. Jack didn't know how to cook, operate the washing machine, or even keep their home tidy. "I've never been good at these things," he'd shrug when Kelly asked for help. At first, Kelly took on the chores, thinking it was temporary. "He'll adjust to married life," she told herself. But Jack showed no interest in learning or sharing the workload. Instead, he left garbage lying around, ignored chores, and acted as though Kelly's efforts were just part of her role as his wife. Whenever she brought it up, Jack brushed her concerns aside with a casual, "You're better at it than I am, so why not just handle it?" What hurt Kelly the most wasn't just the chores, it was Jack's indifference. He seemed to believe that his job was the only contribution he needed to make to their marriage, while Kelly carried the weight of both work and home. Over time, her exhaustion and frustration grew. Adding to the strain was Jack's mother, Mina. She was a frequent visitor to their home, often arriving unannounced and criticizing Kelly's efforts to create a peaceful space. "This apartment is nice, but you could decorate it better," Mina would comment while inspecting the furniture. Kelly tried to keep the peace, going out of her way to make Mina feel welcome. She sent her thoughtful gifts for birthdays and Mother's Day, hoping to win her approval. But Mina found fault in everything. One year, Kelly gifted her a high-quality scarf, only to hear Mina complain, "This isn't from a luxury brand. Couldn't you have picked something better?" Worse, Mina constantly asked Jack for money, claiming she needed it for emergencies or new expenses. Jack never hesitated to hand over cash, even when it stretched their own finances thin. "It's my mom, I can't say no," he'd tell Kelly whenever she protested. Jack's generosity toward his mother and his lack of financial planning soon began to take a toll. Though Kelly earned a good salary, Jack's spending habits were reckless. He often splurged on unnecessary items, justifying it with, "What's the point of working hard if we can't enjoy ourselves?" To make matters worse, Jack started using their Joy credit card for extravagant purchases without consulting Kelly. New gadgets, expensive dinners, and even gifts for his mother all began to pile up on their account. Kelly's attempts to set a budget or talk about their expenses were met with resistance. "You're overthinking it," Jack would say. "We'll figure it out." As their savings dwindled, Kelly felt the pressure mounting. She had worked hard to build a stable life, and now it felt like everything was slipping through her fingers. Between Jack's careless behavior, Mina's constant demands, and her own workload, Kelly began to feel trapped in a marriage that was nothing like the partnership she had envisioned. One evening, Kelly received a phone call that would change her life forever. Her father, Dr. William Cohen, whom she hadn't seen in a few weeks due to her busy schedule, asked to meet her in person. When they sat down together at a quiet cafe, she noticed an unusual heaviness in his demeanor. After a long pause, her father gently broke the news. He had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and treatment was no longer an option. The words hit Kelly like a thunderbolt. Tears welled up in her eyes as she struggled to process what she had just heard. "No, Dad, there must be something we can do," she said, her voice shaking. But her father, always calm and pragmatic, held her hand and said, "Kelly, this is just how life works sometimes. Let's not focus on what we can't change. Let's make the most of the time we have left." Despite his attempt to comfort her, Kelly couldn't contain her grief. Losing her mother years earlier had been devastating, and the thought of losing her father too felt unbearable. But she knew she had to stay strong for him. From that moment on, Kelly's life became a delicate balancing act. She started visiting her father almost every day, spending time at his bedside in the hospital, and managing his care as the illness progressed. She took on more responsibilities, handling his medical appointments, managing his bills, and ensuring he was as comfortable as possible. At the same time, Kelly was already overwhelmed with work and the endless household responsibilities she had been carrying on her own. Sleep became a luxury as she juggled everything, often staying up late into the night to complete tasks she didn't have time for during the day. Despite her exhaustion, Kelly never complained. "Dad was there for me through everything," she told herself. "The least I can do is be there for him now." Her father, even in his declining health, noticed the toll it was taking on her. One day, during one of her hospital visits, he asked her, "Kelly, how is everything at home? How's your marriage with Jack?" Kelly hesitated. She didn't want to burden her father with her marital troubles, but her silence spoke volumes. Her father gave her hand a reassuring squeeze and said, "You don't have to endure anything that makes you unhappy. You deserve better, Kelly. Don't ever forget that." Those words stayed with her, becoming a source of quiet strength during the storm. Amid all this, Jack's reaction to her father's illness was starkly indifferent. When Kelly told him about the diagnosis, his response was a half-hearted, "That's tough. I hope you're holding up okay." There were no offers of help, no comforting words, and no genuine concern. Instead, Jack continued with his routine as if nothing had changed. Kelly pleaded with him to at least visit her father in the hospital, but Jack showed up only once. Even then, he spent most of the time scrolling through his phone. "I've got a lot on my plate too, Kelly," he'd say whenever she asked for his support. His mother, Mina, was no better. Instead of offering condolences or help, she made insensitive remarks like, "Well, at least he's had a good run." The lack of empathy from Jack and his mother cut Kelly deeply. She felt isolated, as though the weight of the world was on her shoulders with no one to share it with. The man she had once believed would be her rock in times of need was proving to be anything but. Through it all, Kelly kept going, fueled by her love for her father and a quiet determination to honor his strength and legacy. Even as her own world began to crumble, she vowed to make his remaining days as peaceful as possible. The inevitable moment came one quiet afternoon. Kelly had been sitting by her father's bedside at the hospital, holding his hand when his breathing slowed and finally stopped. For a few seconds, the world seemed to stand still. Kelly stared at him, unable to comprehend that the man who had been her rock, her guide, and her biggest supporter was gone. Tears streamed down her face as the weight of the loss hit her. Yet, amidst the overwhelming sorrow, she found a small comfort in knowing that she had been there for him until the very end. Dr. William Cohen had faced his illness with dignity and courage, and Kelly vowed to honor his memory by living a life he would be proud of. The days that followed were a whirlwind of funeral arrangements and condolences. Friends, family, and former patients of her father gathered to pay their respects, sharing stories about the incredible impact he had on their lives. It was a heartfelt farewell to a man who had touched so many. However, in the midst of the grief, Kelly felt an undeniable loneliness. Jack and Mina attended the funeral, but their presence was detached and superficial. Jack didn't lift a finger to help with the arrangements, and Mina seemed more concerned with appearances than offering genuine support. A week after the funeral, Kelly received a call from her father's lawyer, Mr. Jenkins, requesting a meeting to discuss her father's estate. Still emotionally drained, Kelly attended the meeting, expecting to handle a few formalities. What she didn't anticipate was the sheer scale of what her father had left behind. Mr. Jenkins explained that her father had been not only a successful doctor, but also a savvy investor in real estate. After settling all taxes and liabilities, the remaining estate was worth over $3 million. In addition to this financial legacy, her father had left her ownership of the private healthcare business he had built and cherished. As his only child, Kelly was the sole beneficiary of the inheritance. Kelly sat in stunned silence as the lawyer detailed the assets and investments her father had meticulously managed. She had always known him to be a man of principles and hard work, but she hadn't realized just how much he had accomplished. Along with the wealth came a heartfelt letter her father had written to her, urging her to use the inheritance wisely and to follow her own happiness. "Kelly," the letter read, "this is my gift to you. a way to ensure that you never have to compromise on your dreams. You have always made me proud, and I know you'll make the right choices. Remember, your happiness matters most. As Kelly left the lawyer's office, a mix of emotions washed over her. She felt gratitude for her father's foresight and love, but also the heavy responsibility of honoring his wishes. She knew the inheritance would change her life, but she couldn't have predicted just how much turmoil it would soon bring. It didn't take long for Jack and Mina's true colors to surface. After Kelly inherited her father's estate, just days after learning about the $3 million inheritance, Jack began rifling through the legal documents Kelly had brought home from the lawyer's office without her permission. When Kelly confronted him, Jack dismissed her concerns with a condescending tone. "Kelly, don't be so greedy," he said with a smirk. "This money isn't just yours. It's for us now, and Mom deserves a share too. After all, she's family." Mina chimed in with a self-satisfied laugh, her voice dripping with entitlement. Finally, Jack. "Now we can live the life we've always deserved." That old man did something right for a change. Kelly's heart sank hearing her late father referred to so disrespectfully. It felt like a slap in the face. The people who were supposed to support her during this difficult time were now treating her father's legacy as nothing more than a lottery ticket. Feeling cornered, Kelly struggled to find a way to handle the situation. Jack and Mina's demands became relentless. They pushed Kelly to transfer the inheritance into a joint account, insisting that they would manage the money together. Whenever she hesitated, Jack guilt-tripped her. "Don't you trust me, Kelly? What kind of marriage is this if we can't share everything?" Mina, on the other hand, wasn't shy about playing the victim. "After all I've done for this family, is it so wrong for me to expect a little comfort in my old age?" Overwhelmed and emotionally exhausted, Kelly felt she had no choice but to give in. She transferred a portion of her savings into their joint account to keep the peace. Despite her growing unease, she forced a smile and said, "Sure, use it as you see fit," all the while feeling trapped in her own home. The moment Jack and Mina gained access to the funds, their behavior shifted drastically. They began treating Kelly's inheritance as a never-ending supply of wealth. Jack quit his job, claiming, "Why bother working when we're sitting on millions?" Mina practically moved into their home, turning it into her personal base for endless shopping sprees and extravagant outings. The duo spent recklessly on luxury brand items, fine dining, and vacations. Mina often returned home with bags from high-end stores, bragging about her latest purchases. "The scarves Kelly used to give me were a joke compared to this," she exclaimed one evening, showing off a designer handbag she had bought with Kelly's money. Jack and Mina's spending spree wasn't limited to the inheritance. They also began withdrawing large sums from Kelly's hard-earned savings, including $100,000 from their joint account. Kelly watched in disbelief as the balance dwindled, powerless to stop them. When she confronted Jack about their reckless spending, he shrugged and laughed. "What's the big deal? The inheritance will cover it. Just relax and let us enjoy life for once." Kelly's frustration and anger grew, but Jack and Mina dismissed her concerns as if they were trivial. It was clear they had no intention of stopping, and Kelly began to realize that if she didn't take a stand soon, her father's legacy and her own financial stability would be completely destroyed. Kelly had reached her breaking point. Watching Jack and Mina recklessly spend her father's legacy, insult her late father, and deplete her hard-earned savings was more than she could tolerate. Quietly, she began to plan her next move. One morning, after Jack and Mina left for a lavish shopping spree, Kelly made her decision. She contacted a locksmith and had the locks on their apartment changed. She also opened a new account, transferring the remaining $50,000 from their joint account to her personal account to prevent further misuse. Then she packed Jack and Mina's belongings into boxes and placed them near the front door. By the time they returned home, Kelly was ready. When they tried to enter the apartment, the keys no longer worked. Jack pounded on the door while Mina yelled, "Kelly, open up." What is the meaning of this? Calmly, Kelly spoke through the intercom. "I've changed the locks. We'll talk, but not here. Meet me at the cafe around the corner." At the cafe, Jack and Mina arrived furious, their voices rising as they demanded an explanation. Kelly sat across from them, her demeanor calm but resolute. She placed a piece of paper on the table. It was a divorce petition. "I'm done, Jack," she said firmly. "This marriage is over. I've had enough of your grief, your disrespect, and your complete lack of support." Jack's face twisted in disbelief. "Divorce? You can't be serious. What about the money? What about everything we've built together?" Mina chimed in, her tone incredulous. "After everything we've done for you, Kelly, this is how you repay us." Kelly didn't flinch. "What you've done for me? All you've done is treat me like an ATM and insult my father's memory. This ends now. You're not getting another cent from me." Hearing this, Jack tried to regain control. His voice rising, he said, "You think you can walk away and keep everything? The inheritance belongs to both of us. It's marital property, and I'll get my share in the divorce." Kelly leaned back, her confidence unwavering. "Actually, you're wrong, Jack. Inheritance isn't considered marital property. It's legally mine, and you're not entitled to any of it." Jack's smug expression quickly faded. "That can't be true. Mom, check this. She's lying." Mina fumbled with her phone, frantically searching for legal information. Her face went pale as she read the confirmation. Property inherited by one spouse is considered separate property, Kelly added, quoting the law. "So no, you're not getting a penny from my father's estate." Jack's disbelief turned to desperation. "Kelly, please don't do this. I don't have a job. I have no savings. How am I supposed to live?" Kelly looked at him, her voice steady but firm. "That's not my problem, Jack. You brought this on yourself. Take responsibility for your actions." For the first time, Jack and Mina seemed truly powerless. They sat in stunned silence as Kelly stood up, sliding the divorce papers across the table. "Sign the papers and stay out of my life," she said before walking away, leaving them to face the reality of their grief-fueled downfall. Following Kelly's resolute decision, Jack and Mina's world fell apart. They soon found themselves in financial ruin since they were unable to access Kelly's funds or inheritance. Jack was left without money after quitting his job amid their careless spending binge. In the meantime, they accrued unmanageable debt from their extravagant joint credit card expenditures. When their creditors arrived, Jack and Mina found it difficult to make even the smallest payments. They were forced to move into a tiny, dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of the city after being forced to downsize significantly. Mina, who was once fixated on projecting an image of high society, was now employed as a cashier at a nearby grocery. Jack took up a number of odd jobs in an attempt to make ends meet. But his entitled attitude and lack of abilities made it difficult for him to hold any of them. Their opulent way of life had faded into the past as the harsh reality of debt and toil took its place. The consequences didn't end there. When his avarice and abuse of Kelly were exposed, Jack's standing in his social circle was ruined. He became even more shunned once Kelly subtly revealed his infidelity throughout the divorce procedures. Mina's socialite acquaintances rejected her because they thought she was a liability, despite the fact that she had thrived on status and influence. things started to get better for Kelly. Now that she had the bequest safely in her possession, she decided to pay tribute to her father by turning his private healthcare company into a nonprofit organization. Her father would have loved the organization's mission of giving underprivileged people access to free and reasonably priced medical treatment. In addition, Kelly sold the apartment she and Jack had shared and moved to her father's former country home for comfort. She adopted a calmer, more subdued way of life there. Without Jack and Mina's poisonous influence, the beautiful surroundings allowed her the mental room she needed to recover and start over. Both personally and professionally, Kelly flourished. She met new acquaintances, reunited with old ones, and even found time to take up long-neglected hobbies. She developed a passion for her work with the foundation and found great satisfaction in knowing that she was improving the lives of others. When Kelly looked back on her journey, she saw how far she had come. "Your happiness matters most," her father's final words became her motto. She made a commitment to always put her own health first and to never allow someone to take advantage of her again. Kelly's tenacity and resolve demonstrated that even in the face of treachery, it is possible to take back your life and come out stronger than before. While Jack and Mina's demise served as a sobering warning of what greed and entitlement may lead to, Kelly had a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in years as a result of her newfound independence and purposeful destiny. She was at last able to live the life she had earned, one that was full of strength, thankfulness, and the unfailing remembrance of her father's love.
The conference room buzzed with chatter as I glanced at my phone, its screen lighting up with an incoming call from Tyler. I stepped out into the hallway, expecting the usual small talk. "How's the trip? When will you be home?" Instead, Tyler's voice came through cold and smug. "I'm divorcing you," he said, his tone almost triumphant. "I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where you're going to live. Enjoy that." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The audacity of it, the complete lack of remorse, it was almost laughable. My hand tightened around the phone as his words sunk in. "You sold the apartment?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Yeah," he said with a dry laugh. "Nicole and I need the money to set up our life together. She deserves better than a tiny place like that anyway." Nicole. The name stung, though I'd suspected for months that there was someone else. Tyler's late nights, his sudden work trips, and the mounting distance between us all pointed to a third party. But to hear him speak her name so casually, as if I were the intruder in their life, lit a fire in my chest. "Sounds good," I replied evenly. There was no way I was giving him the satisfaction of hearing me crack. "My name is Amelia, and up until that phone call, I thought I'd married a man I could trust. Tyler and I had been together for 6 years, and while things hadn't always been perfect, I'd believed in our partnership. We'd worked hard to buy our apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom in the city that I'd fallen in love with the moment I saw it. It wasn't just a home, it was a symbol of everything we'd built together. Or at least that's what I'd thought. Looking back, there had been signs, small cracks in the foundation I'd ignored. Tyler's dismissive attitude whenever I asked about finances, his tendency to brush off my concerns with a charming smile and a quick kiss. I'd always assumed his confidence came from knowing what he was doing. Now I realized it came from knowing he could manipulate me. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I sat through client meetings, nodding at all the right moments while my mind raced. Tyler thought he'd won. He thought he could pull the rug out from under me, sell the home I'd worked so hard for, and walk away scot-free. But there was one crucial detail he didn't know. The apartment deed had been in my name alone for months. I'd had it transferred after we refinanced earlier in the year, a move Tyler had agreed to without much thought, because it meant a lower interest rate. He'd never bothered to ask about the details, or read the paperwork he'd signed. His carelessness was going to be his undoing. By the time I returned to my hotel room that evening, My shock had turned into resolve. I wasn't going to cry or beg. Tyler wanted a fight? Fine. But this was a fight I was going to win. The first call I made was to Chloe, my lawyer and longtime friend. I laid out the situation in painstaking detail, my voice calm even as my pulse raced. "He sold the apartment?" she repeated, incredulous. "Does he even realize that he can't do that without your consent?" "Apparently not," I said, a hint of amusement creeping into my tone. "He thinks he's already spent the money on his new life with Nicole." Chloe laughed dryly. "Well, he's in for a rude awakening. The sale is invalid. You can prove sole ownership, and if he's taken any money from the buyer, he's on the hook for fraud." The word fraud sent a jolt of satisfaction through me. "What do we need to do?" I asked. "First, we'll notify the buyer that the sale isn't legal," Chloe said. "Then, we'll draft a formal letter for Tyler, outlining the consequences of his actions. If he's dumb enough to try anything else, we'll take him to court." As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Tyler thought he'd outsmarted me, that he'd left me powerless and scrambling. But in reality, he'd just set himself up for the ultimate humiliation. I spent the rest of the trip focusing on my work, compartmentalizing my emotions and channeling my energy into the task ahead. The betrayal hurt, but the prospect of reclaiming my life and watching Tyler's smugness crumble gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. When I boarded the plane home, I was ready to face Tyler, ready to dismantle his lies, and ready to start a new chapter without him. This wasn't just about winning. It was about taking back control. The flight home gave me hours to think about how everything had unraveled. Tyler's arrogance was astounding. He hadn't even tried to hide his betrayal, as if I was just another obstacle to bulldoze on his path to freedom. But instead of spiraling into anger, I focused on what I'd do when I returned. Tyler thought I was powerless, but he didn't realize I'd been playing the long game without even knowing it. As the plane touched down, my first call was to Chloe. "I'm back," I said as I hauled my suitcase off the luggage carousel. "What's the next step?" "We've already notified the buyer," she replied, her tone brisk and efficient. They were shocked, to say the least, and not too happy with Tyler. They're willing to cooperate, which helps our case. "And Tyler?" I asked. "I sent the formal letter to his email this morning," she said. "It outlines the illegality of the sale, your sole ownership of the apartment, and the potential consequences of fraud. He hasn't responded yet, but if I had to guess, he's going to be furious." Good, I thought. Let him stew. When I arrived home, the apartment was eerily quiet. Tyler's things were still there, his jackets draped over the chair, his shoes carelessly tossed by the door, but the place felt different, like the energy had shifted. I took a deep breath and set my suitcase down, knowing that the confrontation would come soon enough. Sure enough, Tyler came storming in that evening, his face red with anger and his phone clutched in his hand. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, waving the letter Chloe had sent. "You're telling me I can't sell the apartment? It's half mine." "No, Tyler," I said calmly, crossing my arms. "It's not. The deed has been in my name for months. You can't sell something you don't own." He froze, his face a mixture of confusion and rage. "What are you talking about?" I grabbed the deed from the file I'd pulled earlier, holding it up for him to see. "After we refinanced, I had the deed transferred to my name. You signed off on it, remember? Or did you just skim the paperwork like you always do?" For a moment, he said nothing. Then his expression twisted into a sneer. "You think you're so smart, don't you? This doesn't change anything. I already made a deal, and you're going to look like a fool when it all falls apart." I stared at him, unblinking. "The sale is already void, Tyler. The buyer knows it, and they're ready to take legal action if you don't return the money. Oh, and speaking of money..." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "If you've spent a single cent of that deposit, you're in even bigger trouble." Tyler's confidence wavered for the first time. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice steady. You've spent years treating me like I'm too naive to notice what you're doing. But guess what, Tyler? I've been paying attention, and now you're going to deal with the consequences." He started pacing, his frustration mounting. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. You can't just kick me out of here?" I raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I can. This apartment is legally mine. You can stay here for now, but only because I'm giving you the courtesy of time to figure out your next move. But let me be clear, I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few days, Tyler's anger turned into desperation. He called me repeatedly, leaving frantic voicemails that alternated between begging and threatening. Meanwhile, Chloe worked behind the scenes to ensure that every loose end was tied up. The buyer rescinded the agreement, furious at Tyler for wasting their time and money, and Chloe drafted the preliminary paperwork for the divorce proceedings. "You're in a good position, Amelia," she told me during one of our meetings. "Tyler has no leverage here. Between the voided sale and the fraud charges hanging over his head, he'll have to cooperate if he wants to avoid a bigger mess." Her words were a relief, but they also reminded me just how much I'd allowed Tyler to control my life. For years, I'd ignored his dismissiveness and arrogance, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But now, I saw how much I'd been giving up, and I was determined to take it all back. Lauren, my best friend, came over one evening to help me reorganize the apartment. We boxed up Tyler's things, carefully stacking them in the corner of the living room. "How's he taking all this?" she asked, holding up one of his gaudy ties with a smirk. "Not well," I said, laughing despite myself. "He's still convinced he can talk his way out of it, but I'm not budging." "Good," she said, tossing the tie into the box. "He doesn't deserve a single inch of your space or your time." I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for her support. For so long, I'd felt alone in my marriage, carrying the emotional and financial burden while Tyler took credit for everything. But now, I had people in my corner, and that made all the difference. The final piece of my plan fell into place the day Tyler brought Nicole to the apartment. I was sitting at the dining table reviewing some paperwork when they walked in like they owned the place. Nicole looked around with a smug smile, her arm looped through Tyler's. "So, this is where we're staying?" she said, her voice dripping with entitlement. I stood up, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. "No," I said firmly. "This is where Tyler was staying. You, Nicole, won't be staying here at all." Her smile faltered and she glanced at Tyler, who looked equally stunned. "What is this?" he demanded. "This," I said, gesturing to the apartment around me, "is my home. Not yours, not hers, and certainly not a hotel for you to shack up in after stabbing me in the back." Nicole's expression turned icy, but she said nothing. Tyler, on the other hand, looked like he was about to explode. "You can't do this!" he shouted. "You're being unreasonable." I met his gaze, unflinching. "No, Tyler. What's unreasonable is thinking you could sell my home, walk away with the money, and expect me to just roll over. You're lucky I haven't filed criminal charges for now." Tyler stood in the doorway, his face red with frustration, while Nicole crossed her arms, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "You're being ridiculous, Amelia," he said, his voice laced with desperation. "You can't just kick me out of my own home." I took a step forward, my voice calm but unwavering. "This is my home, Tyler. The deed has been in my name for months, and you know that. You signed the paperwork without even reading it, just like you always do. So no, this isn't your home anymore." Nicole glanced at Tyler, her perfectly manicured hand tightening around her purse strap. "Wait, what's she talking about?" she asked, her tone sharp. "You said this was your apartment, that you sold it." He flinched, trying to wave her off. "It's complicated. I'll handle it." "Oh, it's not complicated," I said, stepping closer. "You tried to sell an apartment that doesn't belong to you. That sale is void, Tyler. And as of right now, you don't have a leg to stand on." Nicole's composure cracked. "You mean the money you told me you had—" She stopped mid-sentence, her voice rising. "Oh my God, did you lie about that too?" "Nicole, let me explain. Tyler said quickly, holding his hands up. But she wasn't having it. No, I said, cutting him off. Let me explain. Tyler tried to sell the apartment behind my back, thinking he could pocket the money and leave me with nothing. What he didn't know is that I had the deed transferred to my name months ago. So not only did he fail to sell it, but he also committed fraud by pretending he could. Nicole's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Fraud, she whispered, taking a step away from him. Are you serious? Yes, fraud, I said, crossing my arms, and I'm prepared to press charges if he doesn't get his things and leave by the end of the day. Tyler's facade finally cracked. You can't do this, Amelia, he said, his voice pleading now. We've been together for 6 years. You can't just throw me out. You threw me out the moment you made that phone call, I said, my voice hardening. You told me you were divorcing me and laughed about me having to find a new place to live. You didn't just betray me, Tyler. You tried to ruin me. So don't stand there and act like you're the victim. Nicole took another step back, her eyes darting between us. This is insane, she muttered, clutching her purse tighter. You didn't tell me any of this, Tyler. You said you had everything handled. He turned to her, desperation written all over his face. Nicole, I can fix this. I just need... She cut him off with a raised hand. Don't, just don't. I'm not getting dragged into your mess. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving him standing there, stunned. I couldn't help but smile as the door clicked shut behind her. Looks like you're on your own, I said, turning back to Tyler. Now, let's talk about what happens next. He slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. Amelia, please. I screwed up. I know that. But you don't have to do this. You're right, I said, grabbing a folder from the kitchen counter and setting it on the coffee table in front of him. I don't have to do this, but I'm going to. This is the divorce paperwork. My lawyer has already drafted it, and I suggest you sign it quickly. The sooner you do, the sooner we can both move on. He stared at the folder, his face pale. You really hate me that much? Hate you? I let out a bitter laugh. No, Tyler, I don't hate you. I feel sorry for you. You had everything. Someone who loved you, a home we built together, and you threw it all away because you couldn't see past your own ego. I stood, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. I want you out of here by the end of the day. Take your things and figure out where you're going to stay. This is the last time I'm giving you any grace. He opened his mouth to argue but stopped, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine, he muttered. I'll go. Good, I said, walking toward the door. And don't even think about trying anything else. Chloe's already handling everything, and the next time you cross a line, I won't hesitate to let the courts handle it. As I opened the door, Tyler slowly stood, grabbing his coat. He didn't look at me as he walked out, his footsteps heavy with defeat. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, not for him, but for the life we could have had if he'd been the man I thought he was. But that moment passed quickly, replaced by a sense of relief. I closed the door behind him, locking it with the new key I'd had made. This was my home now, and no one, especially not Tyler, would take it away from me again. The silence in the apartment after Tyler left was deafening. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. The space no longer felt heavy with his presence, his entitlement, or his lies. It was just me, the home I'd built, and the quiet realization that I had won, not just against him, but against every doubt I'd ever had about standing up for myself. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking in the emptiness where his things had been. His oversized gaming chair, the framed jerseys that had cluttered the walls, and the gaudy coffee table he'd insisted on keeping were all gone. The apartment looked cleaner, brighter, like it was mine again. Lauren came by that evening with takeout and a bottle of wine. Is he really gone? She asked, plopping down on the couch with a dramatic sigh. Gone and not coming back, I said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. I gave him until the end of the day to pack his things. He didn't argue. Lauren raised her glass. To fresh starts and well-deserved victories. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling the weight of the past week slowly lifting. To never letting someone walk all over me again. Over the next few days, I began to reclaim the apartment piece by piece. I rearranged the furniture, moved my favorite artwork into the living room, and filled the space with things that made me happy. It wasn't just about redecorating, it was about turning the apartment into a reflection of who I was, not the person Tyler had tried to make me. Chloe called with updates on the legal proceedings, her voice filled with the kind of confidence that made me feel invincible. The fraud charges are off the table since the buyer decided not to pursue them, she explained. But the divorce paperwork is moving along smoothly. Once Tyler signs, you'll be officially free. Hearing the word free made my chest tighten. It wasn't just about the divorce. It was about everything I'd been carrying for years. The resentment, the self-doubt, the feeling of being trapped in a marriage that didn't value me. It was all finally being lifted. Tyler tried to reach out a few times. His messages ranged from half-hearted apologies to pathetic attempts to guilt me into reconciling. I made a mistake, one read. Can't we at least talk about this? Another was more desperate. You're going to ruin me, Amelia. Is that what you want? I didn't reply. For once, I wasn't going to waste my energy trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. He'd made his choices, and now he was dealing with the consequences. By the end of the week, the apartment felt like a completely new space, warm, inviting, and entirely mine. As I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, the city lights twinkling outside the window, I thought about everything that had happened. Tyler's betrayal had been a shock, but it had also been a wake-up call. For too long, I'd let myself believe that I didn't deserve better, that I had to settle for whatever scraps of respect and love he decided to throw my way. But now, I knew better. I wasn't just reclaiming my apartment, I was reclaiming my life. A month later, my life looked completely different. The apartment was unrecognizable, not because of any drastic renovations, but because of how it felt. It was a space that reflected me, my tastes, my personality, and my newfound independence. The absence of Tyler's clutter and his overbearing presence made the home feel lighter, freer. The divorce was moving along smoothly. Chloe had handled everything with precision, ensuring Tyler had no room to argue or complicate the process. He signed the papers without much fuss, likely realizing that he had no leverage. There was no grand showdown, no emotional plea to work things out. Just a cold, clean break that felt both bittersweet and deeply satisfying. One day, as I sorted through some old papers, I came across a photo of Tyler and me from our early years together. We were smiling, arms around each other, full of hope and promise. I stared at it for a moment, letting the memories wash over me. There had been good times, moments when I truly believed we were building a life together. But those moments were gone, overshadowed by years of neglect, manipulation, and betrayal. I tucked the photo into an envelope and put it away in a drawer. It wasn't worth keeping out in the open, but I wasn't ready to throw it away either. It was a part of my past, but it didn't define me anymore. Lauren and I celebrated the finalized divorce with dinner and drinks at a trendy rooftop bar downtown. "You're glowing," she said, raising her cocktail in a toast. "Single life suits you." I laughed, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "It's not the single life," I said. "It's the freedom. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm living under someone else's rules." We toasted to that, and as the night went on, I felt a growing sense of pride in myself. I'd faced one of the hardest moments of my life and come out stronger. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Back at home, I started planning for the future. The apartment had become more than a refuge. It was a symbol of everything I'd reclaimed. But I knew I wouldn't stay there forever. Someday, I'd move to a new place, one without any lingering shadows of my life with Tyler. Until then, I was determined to make the most of every moment in the space I had fought so hard to keep. As I curled up on the couch that night, a sense of peace washed over me. I thought about how Tyler had laughed during that phone call, so certain that he'd won, and I couldn't help but smile. His arrogance had been his downfall, and my quiet strength had been my salvation. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I called the shots, one where I chose happiness on my own terms. And after a long time, I felt truly free.